when we begin to discuss our association with nature, perhaps we begin by conceding that man is forever in love with nature. Leave aside natural disasters, and nature is unfailingly beautiful. Rare is one who has not been touched by the beauty of this nature. But other than this romantic disposition, perhaps there is a more potent philosophical basis for the idea of man in nature, and consequently to the ideas of placemaking. We use the term Mother Nature, or we refer to nature as her, but perhaps we can also think of nature as looking back at us and the places we make. And then immediately the questions of memory and consciousness of a place come to prominence. These are some realizations which have informed my work, and before I take you to Bengal, where most of my work is, I would like to share with you some thoughts and inspirations which have influenced my work. Impressions. That feeling of being in the delta, hot, humid, breezy, mosquitoes. Patches of green in a sea of greens. Look up and see an ocean in clouds. Gray, white, or the colors of the sun. Sun, that beautiful light I remember from my childhood. Slashes of afternoon on the golden of the straw. I remember the smell. I remember the sounds of the straw. When I said I loved the rain, the sun, and everything in between, I meant I wanted to build, to enjoy the rain, the sun, and everything in between. And where else but here, the home of the Brahmaputra and the Jamuna, wedded together in the softest soil, moist as the womb of the mother. Before the shadow of the rock, the Himalayas, the largest delta in the world, touches the waters of the bay. This is Bengal, a geocultural region woven out of an intricate network of rivers and canals, and to which all art forms respond, from the emotionally rendered Bhavaya songs and the colors of the stitches of Nokshi Katha textiles to the living and lost architecture of the Delta. Much of my childhood was spent by the side of the river Padma, which draws its waters from the mighty Ganges. It is difficult to bring to words my memories of those waters, of the clouds both above and soaked in reflection. And the finest and softest of all soils, the alluvial layers where the ground was still moist from receding waters. But it is not merely the impact of those elements. For me, a river is not the same again, or the darkness before a storm in monsoon. I have been forever changed by the spirituality of that land. The tropical light introduces us to the landscape of Bengal. The strong sun's light reveals the beauty of its nature. It falls on mountains fields of paddy and trees, but the rest is spilt light, lost light. It is the architect who, by the design of his apertures, brings in the spilt light into the deep insides of its architecture. He gives it shape, lets it play, or prevents it from removing his shadows. For with the darkness of shadows comes the appreciation of light, of the color of light, of the depth of light. Have you seen the depth of Khan's light? At the National Assembly building in Dhaka, Khan brings in a silvery light, playful as the water from which the building rises. Nowhere has a space been more gracefully lit than by the magical light of his tropical sun. I am in search of shadows. Shadows under a banyan tree, behind a column, or from a dark cloud. Have you ever been in a forest, a temple, or in a village courtyard? Shadows have a wonderful way of celebrating the presence of light. They seem to say, we do not hide, our purpose is to reveal. Too many times we have seen buildings naked, sunburnt, clad only in a curtain of glass. What is the purpose, I say? Let us not chase the shadows away. Then we are left with a pale, dead light, uninspiring, unnecessary. I return to the comfort of the shadow which the light has brought in. Materials, ask me not of materials. I'm still listening to the story of the clay earth millions of years before you have uncovered it, molded it, burnt it, for bricks or terracotta temples. I wish to know more, and I want to learn to care, like gold in the hands of a goldsmith. And oh, the textures, the imperfections, the feeling, the beckoning. The building doesn't need ornament. The material is the ornament. There was a time when I thought I couldn't live in the city. It was too powerful. Too much happening in too little time. Then I realized it was possible to create your own secret space in a city. It would be free from the rush elsewhere. It would have its own pace, its own time. Time. Is it true that if the sun hadn't moved, there wouldn't have been time? Or is it locked in a Swiss watch or in a Japanese pendulum? I like to leave time out of my buildings. I sense that leaves out a lot of other things, styles, trends, isms, and so on. I'm tired of efficient buildings. Buildings that offer you not a moment to pause, to ponder, to wish, to recollect. Buildings that work well, better than you would wish for, and give you nothing else. In an office or railway station, yes. But in a home or in front of art, in an art gallery, I look for a loss of time, absence of time. And then there arises the opportunity for serenity to invade, and silence, the silence of a breeze, the silence of a deep sleep, the silence of a space. My work used to confuse me, but it was important to be confused. I sense in confusion lies the seeds of discovery of truth. I drink a drink from the broth of 7 or 10,000 years of my history, and I feel alive again. The myth, the mystery, the mysticism, the emotion, the philosophy, the chaos, the romance. Yes, I'm in love with the Bengali way of life. Come away with me for an hour of the Sarod and you will know what I mean. But ask me not of my work, for I create for the love of art. And ask me not of the present or the future, I know neither. Today I wish to show you some projects only in Bangladesh, and these are the various areas that we are working in, some very remote, with various geographical conditions closer to the bay, for example, or up north closer to the Himalayas, which is here. The first project is a number of projects that we did starting from 2005. It was to raise an entire settlement or village. This is the map of Bangladesh, which shows its 700 rivers and its various canals. As you can see, the question is really whether it is water in the land or land in the water. We are working in this area where the river Brahmaputra comes from Tibet, from the glaciers in Tibet, comes down like this in parts of India, and then enters Bangladesh like this, and then eventually flows into the Bay of Bengal. Now, this area here is one of the poorest part of the country. The entire land of Bangladesh is very flat, and so when the waters come in, they come in very slowly. They move very slowly, and they move in a very horizontal fashion. And this is the landscape. In this wide river, sandbanks form, and people live on those islands, river islands or sandbanks. The reason being, they're landless people. And every flooding season, water comes into their homes. So this is, for example, a sandbank forming in the river very slowly, and then it will become something like this. And on it will be houses and homes. So our project was basically to look at this river, which is about 10 kilometers wide, or more than 10 kilometers wide. But in the dry season, these islands form. And in the flooding, in the rainy season, all of it becomes one large river. But the people don't move away, because if they go, it would be hard for them to come back, because it is by possession, there's no right of land. So our project was very simple, to try to understand how we could better this situation. So they would be living here, and the flood would be flowing about 8 feet above where they were sort of living. But still, they would not leave their houses. They would be living on top of their houses or on the trees or something. And so the project, through an NGO, was to try to raise, instead of individual houses, to raise an entire settlement, an entire village above that flood level. The problem is these rivers are quite ferocious, in the sense during the rainy season. There's a lot of water flow, and it's quite a lot of speed with which the water comes, and how to sort of make something which will last and not break away very easily. So we looked at the patterns of the various sandbanks that form, and they form comet shapes because when the water comes like this, and as they leave out, they leave a tail. So this was our sort of proposal for the island, a teardrop-shaped island from where the water will pass like this and leave. And in the middle of the island, there would be a pond which would hold fresh water. Now this is basically what we came out with. So we would dig here, and this would be used to raise this part and also sort of form a kind of a sloping side, and so the water would pass like this. Now it's very difficult to make a kind of a model of this, a hydraulic model of this. So it was based on local knowledge and quite a lot of our observations of the various visits that we did. And this is what a typical plinth would look like in the landscape in the dry season. So it was, as you say, a participatory kind of project. It was self-built, and it was also food for work, in the sense the people whose homes would be moved up onto the raised area, they are the ones who worked on the plinth itself, and they were paid to do so. And it was a very basic way of doing it, as you can see. So that's one of our architects working there with the villagers, giving out layouts. And then this is the pond which is being dug, which again helps to raise the main island, if you will. And then it starts to form, and green returns, and eventually life returns. A very simple solution for a very, very basic budget that we had. Now, for the placing of the houses themselves, we did not design the houses, because the houses, existing houses, would be moved up onto this raised plinth. But we sort of mapped out how the houses could be placed, and this was based on the pattern of the placing of houses in a village. As you can see, instead of a walkway, there are courtyards which connect to another courtyard and then walk into another courtyard, and that's what we did. And we allowed the villagers to not follow our drawing. But what was interesting, that most of the time they did follow the drawing, and they said, yes, but we would like to move this house a little bit this way to sort of get a little bit more breeze, etc. So it was, again, quite an interactive process from which, of course, we learned quite a lot. And this is what it looks like in reality. So in the rainy season, you would see that all of it would be water, and this would be like an island. This is what it is, the life on the settlement. Last year there was a very bad flood, and this is how the rest of the places became. But our plinth, our raised settlements were dry, as you can see, and this is jute being, so life could continue. Of course with difficulty, but life could continue, and the cattle could be brought up onto this raised level and be saved. And this is an actual photograph of that time. So all around, a fierce flood is flowing, but in the center you have clean water from the rain, which is harvested from the rain, and this, of course, is used for various purposes. This is a project from 1999, 2000. This is a building I did for my mother's family. I designed and constructed it. The entire building is constructed by me, in the sense I got very much involved in the construction to understand really how it is done in a country like Bangladesh. But on top of it, there's a little apartment which is like a pavilion. It's open all around. It's a very small apartment. It's divided into 4 spaces. This is the courtyard, a sleeping area. This is a sitting area, and this is a dining area. And the courtyard is a tall kind of a volume. So the air from the surrounding area is drawn up like a chimney or stack effect. This is the courtyard. Now, this is a very personal project. This is where we live. And so the detailing and the materials and the way this came about is a very personal statement, if you will. But most of the material here are recycled. For example, the stone that you see comes from a project 10 years ago. These are all reject pieces. They were lying in a warehouse, and they were used in various ways. So the roof of the courtyard. And then, of course, the living spaces can be darker, and the airflow actually, what is important in a country like Bangladesh, in the tropical kind of weather, is cross ventilation, not just ventilation, but cross ventilation, so that the air is allowed to move in and out. So that is how this works. In the monsoon, for example. Now, all the bricks that you see come from the old part of the city where they're breaking down old buildings. These are about 150-year-old bricks, and these were used in this project. So even the concrete was made from the wood salvaged from the box in which the elevator of the building came. And so the various channels take the rainwater away into different areas and eventually out. So because these were reject pieces, there were various sizes. So for example, these are larger sizes, these are smaller sizes. So every day my work was to sort of set up these, and then the stone person would begin to lay them. The sleeping area. And of course, there's a lot of texture because, as I said, this is a personal space, so there's texture or beneath the foot, so to speak, and then, of course, on the walls and in the ceiling. This is glass set into the concrete before the casting. And the various materials come together, for example, wood, simple concrete, bricks, travertine, again concrete here. And it was also an idea to reverse, in the sense stone flooring, but on the dining table it's ordinary, very ordinary concrete with glass set in. Traditional copper worked in the kitchen. Traditional broken china pieces in the bath area. And all, of course, naturally ventilated and naturally lit. Everything in this house, including doorknobs, hinges, everything is made, handmade. So various kinds of material, as I said, copper, hand-worked copper, teak. This teak comes from Chittagong, which is south of the country, and also from Burma. Concrete. So stone and the other materials. These are the shapes, sizes we got. These are the ways we could sort of set them. We also got very thin pieces. And this is what it is at night. In 1997, we won a national competition to design the Museum of Independence, myself and my former partner, Marina Tabassum. We worked on this project for, as you can see, quite a big part of our life actually. The reason being it's a government project and it went on and on and on. But the location of the project is a prominent, used to be a prominent race course. And then later during the Second World War, it was more planted, and there was other structures which came up. And then one of the winning ideas was there was a need for a museum and other ancillary facilities. One of the winning ideas was to have all the entire facilities below ground, so that we could preserve the horizontal sort of green character of the park. And the roof of the museum then became a public plaza, and which could also hold the story of the Liberation War. Now, you might know that in 1971, Bangladesh became free from Pakistan after a 9-month-long guerrilla kind of a warfare. So people, ordinary people, farmers, people in the villages, in the cities, they fought against a fully equipped army being present in the country. It's a horrifying, there are details on the internet also you can check. It was a very horrifying event. So to mark this project was initiated by the government. On the plaza itself, the first point is where the father of the nation gave his famous speech. And as you move towards the main monument, you encounter a very shallow pool of water with a hole in the center. It is like a black hole which draws in itself the water, and this water falls into the center of the museum below, which is the heart of the museum. So this represents the silent bearing of torture and rape and genocide by the people during those horrifying 9 months. And the only other element is a long wall which sort of guides the visitor towards the monument itself, and this wall holds the ramp which takes the visitors below ground. This is what it is in the city. As you can see, it's a very dense city, and our idea, of course, was to preserve the openness as much as possible. So the only thing that is there is like a large public plaza above ground. Again, the entire 67 acres of land, so all of it is green, and just this part is the plaza area, and beneath it, the museum itself. The museum is again very simply lit. At the heart of it is a kind of a rotunda space which has no display, and in this falls the water from above. Now this is for I don't know how many students there are, but I'm showing this slide to say, well, this is my thesis project in the final year, and that is what was built in the museum. So as you can see, so this was again in the center. I was sort of working on this circle which brings the entire sort of kind of world together, and an open space where everybody could come. This is a cultural space. This is a cultural center, and here again this becomes repeated. And what is to say for students is really whatever you do, whatever exercises you do in whichever year, it really stays with you. So I guess one needs to be quite careful and sort of invest a lot of time and energy into each and every of those projects that you do, even as a student, because they're with you for the rest of your life. This is the section, the museum and the tower itself and the wall that I talked about. And this is how it is set in the landscape. As you approach, this is the plaza that you see, and that's the shallow pool of water, the ramp going down, the museum below grade, light coming from above. So all of it is concrete. This is the central rotunda, and this is a black exhibit area which shows, which it has photographs of genocide. And the government wanted to have these because these are part of the facts of that period. And as one is sort of feeling emotional by seeing all those, one enters into this space, which is at the heart, as I said, of the museum. And the water falls from above, and through the only oculus in the ceiling through which the light comes. And in this space, there are no displays. And in the sound of the water, one may remember those fallen, known and unknown. One continues up through the various exhibition spaces. Here, the idea of monumentality was important. Now, for me, monumentality is not about how big it is about presence. So it was important that we sort of look at the proportions and how it sort of is there. And that's how we sort of try to relate to the strength of the people through those, through those struggles. The main monument itself is a tower of glass. We call it a tower of light. The glass is not set like this, as you ordinarily see. It is set like this, which means it is the property of refraction is used as opposed to reflection. So it is stacked glass, 19 mil by 75, formed into prefab panels, which goes into this vertical space frame. And this, of course, harkens back to the thousands of years of our heritage of laying brick one above the other. And so the staggered glass has a certain materiality to it, a certain strength to it, and that is what we were interested in. It is low iron, low chromium clear glass, set very simply into the main structure, and it goes all the way to 46 meters or 150 feet. And during the day, in certain angles, you see the sun sort of moving through the tower itself, and at night it becomes a beacon. These are photographs taken by me. There is no photoshopping. This is on a national day. From far away. This is a mosque, the first mosque. We have been doing quite a number of mosques. This is the first one we did. It's in the port city of Chittagong. This is sort of made by a local business person. So I just go back one slide. The mosque is in the port city of Chittagong. The sponsor of the mosques, they wanted to build it and give it to the community. For us, it was important to not look at the mosque as only as a religious space, but more as a spiritual space, and to sort of think if it could also become a kind of a place where the community can gather. So it essentially consists of two simple volumes, two cuboid volumes, one the mosque proper, and the other one as the courtyard. So the courtyard is again given a form, so it is a kind of a reception kind of a volume for the main mosque itself. This is the section to which I will come back later. So it is in the peri-urban area, and it connects sort of both communities, the urban communities as well as somewhat rural communities. And the front block, which is the courtyard, sort of links the nature, the horizontality, with the vertical. And the horizontal sort of represents our life on earth, to nature, our connection to other people, and again, this as spiritual or connection to Zenith. So everywhere there's connection to nature, as I said, and views of it, views to the community, to the surrounding areas. Now the client wanted a dome. They said we must have a dome. Now we realized why later on, after much struggles, we realized why they were asking for a dome. It was because the dome is an accentuating element. It sort of announces the presence of the mosque. But we don't need the dome as a structural element anymore. Historically, of course, as you know, the domes used to span spaces, but we don't need them anymore. So we cut up the dome to express the fact that this is a non-structural element, and then it brought in light, and it also took out light at night. During the day, and at night. So the idea of this as an accentuating element is again more pronounced. We did another mosque again in Chittagong, in the port city of Chittagong, but here we found an old building, an old mosque, about 200 years old. And although the owners were in two minds of keeping it because it was falling apart, we sort of restored it with the help of other experts. And this became the starting point, the generator of our design. So this is the old mosque, which is in the front, on the roadside. And we designed the new mosque, and not a big one, at the back. Now the owners, or the sponsors of this again wanted a large structure, and we fought to say that it should really not be a big one. It should have some link in terms of proportion and in terms of visual connection to the old one. And so the past comes to the fore and the new goes to the back. A very simple volume with a main prayer space and veranda all around. Here, moving away from this idea of ornament, the banishing of ornament in modernism, I knew it was important that the geometry in Islamic architecture was important. And this was brought in, but only in the ceiling. So you see it as you go in and you look up. Elsewhere, it is plain. And this is the roof structure which sort of generates that geometry. We borrowed an element from the old mosque, which is a kind of a grill. And this was turned into a cast iron grill, which wrapped the new structure. And so this is what it became. Now, again, these people, my clients, they wanted a dome. And again, this discussion started. So again, the idea of accentuating the dome, which is a circular element, now became a cuboid element. Again, announcing that it is not an ordinary building, it is not a school or a house, but it allowed for air and light to come in as well. And of course, the various geometric patterns in the ceiling cast itself on the floor. This is what it is. It's a simple concrete structure cast in wood. And the veranda is wrapped with this cast iron grill, which is the pattern of which is inspired from the old building, from some of the geometric shapes in the old building, and it is hung. So it does not touch the ground, it is made light. This heavy sort of curtain is made light by not touching the ground, and it floats on water. The ceiling, as you go inside, and in the corners, the light comes in. And the casting of the concrete sort of corresponds to the wood in the doorway and other areas. And this is the veranda, which does not touch or does not come down to the ground. We were invited to make an installation in Venice 2 years ago, and the idea was to sort of talk about the struggles that we face as architects working in a complex climatic and economic area as in Bangladesh. So this was the proposal which was sent to the curator, Alejandro Aravena, and these were the various sketches. It was in the Giardini in the central pavilion and in quite a prominent location just next to the entrance. The idea was a labyrinth to express that whatever we try to do, it is not easy to do. We go through various processes, and it is almost like going through a labyrinth. And then as we pass the labyrinth, we go into an inner space where the various projects are displayed. So here, 4 projects are displayed, 3 of which deal with climate change, the projects that we had done. One of the things that we did is to turn the idea of labyrinth, which is an architectural sort of element which has been going through history again and again, but we turned it in a way because the labyrinth is made of glass, which means you see it, but you cannot go through. And as you move through the labyrinth itself, you encounter various terracotta plaques or tiles on which are etched drawings of old buildings, so, which sort of inspires us, which sort of guides us to our new sort of models and buildings that we do. And so again, this is a kind of reversal of processes and thousands of years old technology of making handmade tiles with a laser imprint on them. And as one goes inside, one goes into the kind of inner landscape. Now here, the various projects are displayed on these thin rods. These are like plans. The idea is to express that our projects take time to grow. We have calculated that it takes an average of 7 years for us to complete a project in our office. It takes a lot of patience. It's definitely not advertisement. It's much slower than that. So it is like tending to a plant. So they grow slowly, and that was one of the ideas for the various projects to be displayed. And it was, of course, difficult for people to find their way through because it was difficult to understand whether there is a glass or not. But of course, that was intentional. The other reference, of course, to glass is Venice, where the Vanini glass is famous. In 2007, a major cyclone struck Bangladesh by the name of Sidr. You might know that Bangladesh has a very complex weather system, probably the most complex weather system in the world. We have major cyclones every few years. We have floods. We are in a major earthquake zone. We have quite a lot of heat, which sometimes causes drought. So it's a very, very complex system. And the cyclones usually form here in the Bay of Bengal. Instead of moving towards Thailand, it moves up towards Bangladesh. And when it makes landfall, it causes huge destructions. And this is a satellite image of that cyclone of 2007. And this is what happened. It took away lives of more than 10,000 people, innumerable animal lives, damages of at least $1.7 billion. And as you can see, there were wind speeds of 260 kilometers per hour. I was in Dhaka on the night when this happened. The next morning, of course, one heard the reports, and some of my friends who are photographers and journalists were sending back what they were seeing, and it was, of course, horror. And I decided that I didn't want to be in my studio comfortable like this, but to be there, to see, at least to be with them, and to sort of see what was happening. So I myself and 3 of my colleagues, we went to that area. We took a boat. We were on the boat for 5 days, and we traced the path of the cyclone as it made landfall. So the cyclone came in like this. So we took a boat from somewhere here. We came all the way down. We went to a place here. There's a little island here, and then we moved to all these areas. And of course, everywhere we went, we saw destruction. Myself, being a photographer, I took photographs. One of my colleagues made sound recordings of whatever. We didn't ask any questions. People were, of course, traumatized. It's beyond belief what was happening there. So we never asked any questions. We never made any interviews. We just recorded what we heard as people were talking. And so this is what it became. This is a river, if you believe it. You don't see it. You see a little bit of the land over there. And so try to imagine that the cyclone struck at midnight. It's all dark. The power had been cut for safety. The wind speed is 260 kilometers per hour. Tidal surge has come in to 7 meters high. Where you are standing, it's above 7 meters. So it's like an inland sea. You don't see anything. You just hear the howling of the wind, and the water is, of course, very, very choppy. And then when we were going around, people talked about demons in the sky. And this is something we could not understand. They always talked about demons. And then they said demons with fire. And we thought this is from trauma. They were not able to sort of express themselves, or they saw something, they were hallucinating. But then later on, we understood that it was really fire in the sky. The speed of the wind was so much, it caught fire. So then you are floating in water, and there's fire in the air. And it is a limitless kind of there's no bank to where you can reach. And of course, you don't see the trees much because they're either blown away or they're underneath you. This is where forest was, and as you can see how it is, these are the photographs that I took. For example, this little girl has lost everyone in her family. She is of age 5. And this is where her house was. So the idea was not to take the portraits, not to show the faces, because they're traumatized. So I didn't want to go into this kind of third world photography. So they were always from the back. I was with them. So the idea is that all of us, we are with them looking at where they were. This man, for example, has lost his wife, his children, his brother and his family, his mother and his father. 8 persons of that family. And when we met him, he was really not making any sense. He was not talking sense. This man, for example, was saved by his wife, because his wife was very clever. The moment the water came in, because you see the water comes in very quickly, and the moment the water started coming in, she said, take your clothes off, because sometimes the clothes get stuck and you get strangled. That is how many times they die. So what she did was they took off their clothes, they climbed a tree, and because she had a sari, just like this, you saw the sari that my wife was wearing, she took out that sari and she wrapped herself, her husband, and their baby onto the tree, and they were saved. Now you can imagine the force of this from this. This is all that remains of their house. Here used to be a house, and this is what is left of it. So when we see this destruction, when we see what has happened, and we are not aid agencies, you know, it's very difficult to take all this, and we went back. We couldn't do anything, but we thought maybe we could design something, we could make something. And the idea was to make a cyclone shelter. Now, of course, in Bangladesh, there are many cyclone shelters, at least 2,500, including those from the government and other NGOs, and it saves millions of lives every time there's a cyclone. But based on our own experience, on our own observations, we thought we could sort of make some changes to the existing models. And this was the first sketch. The idea was to make a kind of a cruciform-shaped building and then sort of protect it with a ramp. And the ramp, then immediately you would have kind of light wells and ventilation wells in the 4 corners. And the ramp could then also protect the inner structure from high wind and hydraulic pressure. This is the plan. As I said, very simply done. During normal times, it would be used as a school and a clinic. So the upper floor is a school, 3 classrooms, 2 shifts up to class 5. And on the ground floor is a clinic, which also has X-ray and other diagnostic facilities. But the entire structure is protected by a ramp. And the entire structure is of concrete. Now, why these 2 factors? Now, first of all, during a cyclone, there are flying debris. Everything is flying, from cows to trees to branches to tins, and it's very dangerous. So the building is protected by these, the ramps. And in normal standard cyclone shelters, there are ordinary glasses and windows, which means the glasses break, and it is very difficult for people to sort of take in all the sound and the high wind that comes in. So our windows are again made smaller and protected because they are in concrete niches. This is what would happen in a normal situation. But during the cyclone, people can gather in large numbers because the ceiling height is more. And most importantly, they can take the cattle up to the roof. This is what we learned, because during a cyclone, they don't like to leave behind their cattle, because if they may die or be lost. So to have some place for them on the roof, they could at least be saved from tidal waves. These are some of the renders. It was important to make it in concrete. The existing structures are brick and concrete, which don't last in the saline kind of a sea kind of weather. So this was all concrete. But we tried to make it, in terms of budget, we tried to optimize the costs. And from the photographs we took and the stories that we had, we made a little booklet to raise funds, to make one prototype of this design. And we failed. We could not raise enough money after trying for 5 years. And then there was a group from Luxembourg who thought this idea was interesting, and they took one of my exhibitions to Luxembourg. This is at the foundation of Institute of Architects in Luxembourg. They made this exhibition, and happily, the cyclone shelter, of course, was on exhibit, and happily we were able to raise funds for one project. And then, after almost 7, 8 years of trying, we started construction near the Bay of Bengal. It is under construction. It's nearly finishing now. So these are a little bit older images in the landscape. This is what it looks like somewhat. It's not finished. So this is an actual image of the ramp sort of going up. And the ramp sort of twists as it moves up. This is in the landscape. It was important to have this as a marker because in rural Bangladesh, there are hardly any postcodes or road numbers. So this is by word of mouth that people will come to know that there is a cyclone shelter there. So it was important that it quickly becomes known as a different kind of a building. So this is nearing completion finally after 11 years. The insides, inside one of the classrooms. The Friendship Center is in the north of the country. It is a learning center for the NGO named Friendship. And this is the land which we found. It was prone to flooding to a height of 8 feet. The water would come up to here. And of course, to save the complex, we would need to raise it above that level of floods. And this would be the general way of working, to sort of raise this. And we designed, we made a design which I showed to the client, and which we were very happy with, and the client was very happy with. And when we did the cost estimates, we realized that we were losing almost the entire budget just trying to raise the project. So it was costing us double the amount we had at that moment. And so we had to go back to the drawing board, and there was no way we could make this within the limited budget we had. And then I realized our building is not this. This was our building. And so this became. And we protected it through an embankment. So if floodwater came, we would essentially be underwater, save for the fact that we would be protected by a mini embankment. Now, this is not the first time this has been used. We have examples of this from a town called Mahastan from the 3rd century BC, where the same kind of embankment had been used. We have only ruins of that settlement, but one was inspired by that or took a clue from that to sort of try to take the challenge of making it within the limited budget that we had. With that came the attendant problem of rainwater getting collected within the areas of the embankment, and we of course introduced a series of tanks and pools to collect the rainwater and harvest the rain. And we also introduced large tanks to hold sewage because we didn't want it to contaminate the flood water. So this is what it is, 2 blocks. The first block is the learning area, and the second block is the residential area, both centered around community spaces. The first is a reception pavilion around which are the classrooms or the discussion rooms, and here is a dining pavilion around which are the various dormitories and residential quarters. This was very much inspired by the ruins of Buddhist monasteries in the region, not far from the site. You can see some of the plans here, and these are ruins from about 1,000 years old, but they're beautiful in the way they are today, with the beautiful textures, and you can see the plan of it, but you don't see much else. But it gives you that feeling. You know, this is a monk's cell, for example. A small cell where a monk, as you know, would meditate for days on end, perhaps even without water and food. And this inspired us to sort of think about this space, this learning center, as a kind of a meditative space. And we sort of sought to transform this into this. And then, of course, we could connect it to the greater surrounding landscape. The entire complex is in a rural agricultural area, and it was very important to sort of relate to that as well. But the thermal mass, which is the earth on the ceiling, on the roof, helps to lower the temperature in the insides, and therefore we can obviate the need for air conditioning even during hot summer months. So the broken forms of this pavilion kind of forms helps to sort of encourage natural ventilation, cross ventilation, and the introduction of these pools also helps in microclimatic cooling. All the material are local, so the bricks that you see are from just 1 kilometer away. The bricks were not of very good quality, but we set up a kind of a system to sort of sort the bricks out. So it was 3 sortings. First was sorted at site, then it was sorted when it was put on the truck, and then it was sorted when it was brought down from the truck, and then it was sorted again when it was actually used by the masons. So one predominant material, bricks for the structure, bricks for the floor. One of the reasons is here we would have various types of people coming from donor agencies, from EU and the West, to people from the river areas, sometimes who don't even have shoes. So it was important to balance that, where everybody could come, from all walks of life. And this is one of the pools, of the courtyards with the pools. The photographs are by Hélène Binet, whom I think is one of the most wonderful photographers in the world. The dining pavilion. This is local mahogany wood, one of the dorm rooms, the male dorm areas. So sometimes the ladies or the people who would come for training, for example, expecting mothers would come for training for hygiene and sanitation, and they would sit on the ground like this and discuss. So we had so little budget for this project. I say all we could give them is the luxury of light and shadows. So it was a kind of a weave of these pavilions and pools and gardens, and very, very simple materials, and through which we hope that lives of people would be better. This is the last project I will show you. It's an art center and park by the foundation which hosts the Dhaka Art Summit. You might know this has become a very important summit in the art calendar. It takes place every 2 years. And in the region, it has become very, very important. And they have initiated this project. This is under construction. It is in the northeast of the country in an area called Sylhet. It is close to India. It is all around is India, and here is our project. It is kind of a undulating terrain, very wet. The wettest place on earth is very close to here, so a lot of rain and very green. And also there are very beautiful estuaries and wetlands all around. So this is the site. We enter through here, and as you can see, all of it is paddy fields and almost forest-like trees and growth. We chose 3 areas. Instead of having one large building, we separated them. This is phase 1. There would be more things coming up, but this is a sculpture park. So we thought it is interesting to break up the various functions so that people would sort of walk from one area to the other and enjoy the various artworks sort of on display in the landscape. So this would be the first structure as one comes in. This is an art gallery or kind of a gallery, and this is the artist's residence. This would be a residency program where artists would come and live. So the entry structure is really a space trap. So space does not flow directly in or out. So there's a kind of a trap which sort of one comes in, gets dropped off, and then walks inside, or uses a small kind of a buggy to sort of go in. Local handmade bricks. So from the entry structure, one sort of goes inside into the inner landscape and then into an area where the artist's residence would be. We chose a small hillock for the artist's houses. One part was very much wooded with a lot of thick bamboo sort of overgrowth, and the other area was open. So this is the area we chose for the houses themselves, and in it we inserted the dining pavilion. And we made the houses individual, and sort of we played around to see how we could place them in the landscape, to sort of see how it sets into the topography and also sort of connect to the various views. And we came up with something like this, and then onto this, because for me these views out, this curated kind of views out were very important. And this is the final kind of layout. The houses here, the dining pavilion here, another house here. And very simple, again almost monastic. This is built of concrete cast in wood. The concrete takes the color of the earth. The earth here is reddish yellow. It takes the color of the earth, and we use a grayish green stone sort of which merges with the rest of the green. Various houses of the artists. As I said, some views out onto the landscape where the various sculptures and installations will be. For the last structure, the gallery, the curator said we needed a black box, you know, how it is today. They want a black box or a white cube where they can sort of make things on their own. And this was the dimension sort of they wanted, and said, don't worry about this, we'll make it. You don't have to do anything about it. And of course, I realized this is going to be a disaster. So the moment the meeting ended, I drew this. I said, we have to do something about it. And this quickly, in a few hours, became this. And then, of course, this is what we are making. It's under construction. This is to be finished before the end of this year. And it's set in the paddy field. Agriculture continues. Made of local handmade bricks. And the space in between the curved walls and the main black box, so to speak, we are using those spaces for the various installations and artworks. Thank you very much.